Hi everyone, my name is Nick Broughton and I'm a Random Fish. If you're a Random Fish too, then click that subscribe button and also like this video. Today, I'm going to be taking a bit of a break from looking at movies. Well, I say break, I've only done 3, but you know, I'm trying to do some variations on this channel, not just do movies, but to do games and comics as well. So, in variation of my very first game review that I'm going to do, I'm going to look at something that I've been playing, well, I've been a fan of for many years. AdventureSoft's Simon the Sorcerer. Now, for those of you who don't know, Simon the Sorcerer is a fantasy game that you play on the PC, or alternatively on any other station that happens to possess it. Although nowadays you can't really play this original game without using something very different on your computer. For those of you who know, ScumVM, brilliant piece of equipment, brilliant piece of software. But Simon the Sorcerer is essentially a game about a young boy who's transported to a mystical fantasy world, where in this game in particular, he has to save a Jedi? No, not a Jedi, a wizard. Why would I think it's a Jedi? Bizarre. But this is a wizard named Calypso from the clutches of an evil wizard known as Sordid. Yeah, Sordid, you figure that out. So, in the game, you have to go through various obstacles, various puzzles being solved, as well as being able to try and defeat Sordid at the very end. Simon is a very sarcastic character, and this is discovered much with, you know, not just this game, but the games that come after it. That's right, this is part of a franchise. Now, the first one, he's not really that sarcastic or really all that, you know, talkbackative. But in the second game, The Lion, the Wizard and the Wardrobe, released approximately 3 years later after this one, the first one being released in 1992, and the second one being released in 1995. The second one, Simon the Sorcerer 2, The Lion, the Wizard and the Wardrobe, brings Simon back to the fantasy world after he leaves, after saving Calypso from the Sordid. Sordid at this point is you know, trying to get Simon back into the world so he can exact his vengeance. Simon is pulled back and has to discover a way of getting home by finding something called Mucozade. If you think that sounds familiar, just put an L instead of an M and you got Lucozade. It's that simple. Again, you have to solve various puzzles in order to find the Mucozade and also to return home eventually within the confines of the game. I'm trying not to go into spoiler territory, but that's the basic premise of the game. Within this concept, however, Simon becomes a heck of a lot more sarcastic and has a lot more to say to other characters. And to the player as well. For example, within the game, you have items that you've picked up along the way. Mostly all through Simon's hat. His hat is massive on the inside. It's like a TARDIS, only not quite as cool and doesn't travel through time and space. But the hat itself is unlimited in terms of space, at which point you can store almost anything in it. Heck, in the first game, you put a ladder in your hat first time round. That's how cool it is. However, within the confines of the game, Simon ultimately has things to say to the player, as opposed to when you know, trying to combine things with the other things in the inventory. In the second game, there's lines like, "Have you considered alternate forms of medication?" And the always favourite within the game, "That doesn't work." Literally, you place that and he says, "That doesn't work," and giggles to himself. And you know that he's giggling to himself because this is an 8-bit game, or at least close to looking like an 8-bit game. So when he does that, and he giggles, his shoulders do this. This is literally how he looks in the game. That doesn't work. Literally, he stands there shrugging his shoulders like that. And yes, my door makes weird noises when I shrug. It's a thing. Leave me alone. But the games themselves keep on going. Simon the Sorcerer 2 is not where the game ends. You then get Simon the Sorcerer 3D, released approximately 7 years later in 2002. Yeah, there are other games. There was one other game that was released in between, but I don't want to talk about that because that doesn't really continue the story. That's just a fun little game for you to be playing and all that sort of thing. Although I think there's 2 that are in between. That's how insignificant those games really are. But in the third one, it's 3D. Up until now, you've been playing in a 2D environment filled with a bunch of sarcastic characters along with a sarcastic protagonist. However, in this one, you get 3D, a 3D sarcastic protagonist and 3D sarcastic people around him. Does it really add much to the gameplay? Not really. Just makes you realise just how square and weird everything is. For example, this is how good the games are. They actually do fourth wall breaks a lot. In other words, Simon does things like talks about how his hands are cubes instead of just normal hands this time. Or sometimes when a character is trying to explain something to him in ways of actually being able to move in the game, he turns and looks directly at the camera and just says, "You really should be talking to them, not me." That's what makes this game good. That's what makes all these games good. There are other games in the future for Simon the Sorcerer. Unfortunately, one of them, the latest one that was released, has unfortunately been put on hiatus due to a lack of funding or a lack of interest by other companies, which I think is very sad. The first one is good, it's still funny, you're still able to get these things done, but the second one is just so much more brilliant. And why? Because they weren't afraid to go full Saki with him. Now, this Simon the Sorcerer, the actual character himself, is voiced by Chris Barry. For those of you who are massive fans of a certain BBC show, you should recognise him as the man who does this. Mr. Arnold Judas Rimac. This is where the games, I feel, are at their best. Certain games, in certain points in time, were just better. Not because they had better story or better gameplay, but because they had better characters. In this world, you honestly felt that Simon was a good character. Not because he was a good guy who always did the right thing, but because he was a teenager. He spent his entire time wandering around making sarcastic comments to people because that's what teenagers do. That's what we would all do. I mean, hell, there's a scene in the first game where you come across a character called the Swampling. The Swampling feeds you Swampling stew, which is absolutely disgusting, and the only reason you can get out of it is by leaving. And every time you come back, he's so happy to see you, he literally makes you more and more stew. Up until the point where he actually has to leave in order to get the ingredients to make more stew. And then you steal stuff from his house in order to finish the game. But that's neither here nor there. But in the second game, when you come across what you think is the Swampling for the second time, he's stood outside a McDonald's-style restaurant called McSwamplings. McSwamplings. Yeah, that's the thing. You wander in and you see him, and what's Simon's opening line when he wanders into the scene? The line is quite literally, quote for quote, this: "My God, he's gone commercial. I do not believe it." Literally. That is the character. He is so sarcastic, and yet he's not witty. He's not witty at all. He's like Ash from the Evil Dead movies. You know that he's never going to come up with any zingy one-liners in his entire life. Yet somehow you still cheer for him when he gets things right in the game. And why? Because you constantly feel connected to him. That is what makes a good game, in my opinion. Not a massive fantasy setting. The fantasy settings are nice. Games are meant to take us out of our comfort zones and put us in a place where we actually have to think in order to get things done. But for a kid growing up in the 90s, who was born in 1990, I might add, games like this made it a little bit more fun for us, and also taught us that being sarcastic is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to be frowned down on by the fringes of society. It's quite literally one of the only things you can do to get by in life. Then you should do it. Now, my recommendation is to play all of the Simon the Sorcerer games if you can get a hold of them. One of them, I believe, it was available in Germany first, but I think it's become available in UK since 2008. So if you can find it, bully for you. At the moment, the games that I've played are the ones that I always will recommend are Simon the Sorcerers 1, 2, and 3D. That's right, 3D. That's how cool this is. That's right, I'm filming in 3D. No, I'm not really filming in 3D, it's just I am 3D, and, you know, it's just... It's... okay? But anyway, back to the fun stuff. The gameplay itself, you don't... in the third game, you wander around using the normal keys. In other words, the moving forwards, back, and left and right keys, as you would hope to do. However, in the first two games, it's a mouse pointer game, so you click where you want to go, and he walks there. Now, that is not a massive thing. Obviously, for games, a long time, the arrow keys have always been the way of walking around, or you have the pointer games. I understand that. But the retro feeling of this game is part of what makes it distinct to me. Now obviously, if you were born in the 2000s, or if you were born in that, and you wanted to look back on this with a nostalgic feel, I understand. It's a good game. But let's face it, when I was growing up, these games were the shit. And not because they were groundbreaking graphics, but because they were just fun. And I think that's one of the things that really inspires me about this game. It's not fantastic looking. It's pretty damn well designed for a lot of it, but there's still glitches in this game. There always will be. There's glitches in every game if you look hard enough. But the point is, in some of the Sorcerer games, they were more obvious. Sometimes even in the 3D one. In the 3D one, there's a point where you're running around a city, an entire city as part of the game, and you wander into a bit where it's just white screen, and then you have to wait for 5 seconds to make sure everything loads, so you actually have colour in your screen. But you know what? That adds charm to it. That adds fun to it. I'm not saying the game should crash whenever there's a white screen. I'm saying the fact that there is a white screen means that the game has to think. Means that it actually has to try and load itself. And I think that's what I miss. I don't miss the fact that things crash every 5 minutes. I miss things thinking. I miss the computer games actually going, oh, I should probably finish this up. This also led into a thing that I had as a long time for when I was a kid. In other words, I used to think that little goblins used to live inside the monitors, painting things on the screen. I didn't really, but it's fun to think that I might have, right? But that's what's important about the Simon the Sorcerer games. The characters. The characters are what make it fun. They always will be. Simon is sarcastic and not at all witty, but makes you feel pretty damn special for having played him. You have Calypso, the mentor character, if you will, throughout the games. He's wise and easily offended and everything else that a mentor really needs to be, especially with a character like Simon, let's be honest. Sordid is an amazingly overdramatic and melodramatic villain. He really is. His evil laugh is so brilliant, and he looks like a slightly bizarre version of Voldemort if he had a nose. You know, his grey slicked back hair just makes him look like something like Tim Curry would wear as part of a Halloween costume. He wanders out just going, yes, have a lovely day. But that's what makes it cool. Sordid was cool, Simon was cool, Calypso was cool. In the second one, you meet Calypso's granddaughter. And, to be honest, Simon can't have a conversation with her, because whenever you walk up to her, and it's highlighted in this corner of the screen, because when you go to a character in the corner of the screen, you see their face. Not with his granddaughter, you don't. You see the package, if you will. Yeah, it's funny though. But that's also because, again, it feeds into Simon's character. Simon is a teenager. He will always look at things like that because that's what teenagers do. We look at these things not because people want us to, but because it's literally just like we can't help it. Just boom. Wow. That's amazing. It happens. But that completes the rant for this game. Simon the Sorcerer. Totally recommend it. Check it out. Like, subscribe, and everything else. Random Fish out.